Welcome back to The Explainer. Let's just jump right in, because today we are taking a strictly objective, documentary-style look into a highly emotional and deeply controversial manifesto. I want to be super clear right up front. Every single claim, every perspective, and all the information we're unpacking today comes directly from one specific source document written in March 2020 by the founder of Life China Yuan, Xu Feng. We aren't here to judge, and we certainly aren't picking sides. We're simply here to explore the intense, fascinating psychology of a self-proclaimed prophet who feels entirely abandoned by the world. So let's get into the text.
We're kicking things off with this incredibly jarring hook. To really get this manifesto, you have to put yourself back in March 2020. The whole globe was just plunging into the absolute panic of the COVID-19 pandemic. But while governments and scientists were scrambling, Xu Feng was looking at the virus through a totally different lens. For him, this wasn't just a public health emergency, it was an apocalyptic trigger. He literally framed the pandemic as the opening act of an extinction-level event.
And that brings us to Section 1, the apocalyptic warning, a looming global catastrophe.
The sheer scale of the devastation he predicts here is, frankly, staggering. According to the text, Xu Feng believes this whole crisis stems from a massive underlying spiritual crisis within humanity. He warns that our traditional ways of living are dragging us toward a horrific end. He throws out the number of 100 million potential virus deaths, but he doesn't stop there. He predicts people will simultaneously be facing floods, fires, starvation, and even extreme freezing. It's like he's painting a picture of the planet itself entirely rebelling against the human race, leaving almost zero survivors.
So what exactly is his answer to all this impending doom? Let's move to Section 2, creating a new lifestyle, the utopian experiment.
You can just feel his intense frustration practically jumping off the page here. Xu Feng claims he has spent 18 solid years, nearly 2 decades, desperately shouting from the rooftops to get people to focus on spiritual construction. He says he even went straight to the top, sending urgent warnings to the United Nations and to Chinese President Xi Jinping. But, as he writes with deep bitterness, those letters went totally unanswered, just complete silence. And it was exactly that silence from global leaders that pushed him and a small group of followers, who he playfully calls Chanyuan grasses, to just go and build their own utopian model back in 2009.
Now check out this number, 600. Xu Feng claims that since they started building these alternative communities, they had nearly 600 visits from government and public security officials. But here's the wild twist. He doesn't actually frame these visits as crackdowns. He basically uses them as a massive flex. He boldly claims that any official who saw their community with their own eyes could not possibly deny that his utopian model was a total success. He's saying they saw it and they know it works. But outside that little utopian bubble, it's a completely different story. That brings us to Section 3, public backlash and abuse, the harsh reality.
This dichotomy right here perfectly captures the core conflict of the whole manifesto. The contrast is just massive. On one hand, you have the public's view. By his own admission, people online hurl brutal insults at him, calling him a demon, a cult leader, a complete scammer. But then, on the flip side, Xu Feng sees himself as a deeply misunderstood, self-sacrificing visionary, a modern savior guiding human survival. The gap between how the world sees him and how he sees himself is an absolute chasm.
And we aren't just talking about anonymous internet trolls here. These attacks are deeply, deeply personal. The text highlights massive fractures within families. Xu Feng talks about taking heat from the angry parents, spouses, and kids of his followers. He even details this one really painful incident that happened the very day he wrote the manifesto. A father threatened to hold him legally accountable, basically accusing Xu Feng of brainwashing and completely ruining his child's mind. The social friction this group caused is just incredibly intense.
Faced with all that anger, Xu Feng throws out this desperate rhetorical plea. He pushes back the hardest against the idea that he's some kind of scammer out to make a quick buck. To defend himself, he says he actually liquidated over a decade of his personal life savings and poured every single penny into building the Life China Yuan communities. He argues that far from living the high life off his followers, he actually struggles on a daily basis just to scrape together 3 meals.
Which leads perfectly to this mind-boggling figure, 10. Xing Feng claims that his writings hit over 170 million clicks on a North American website. Huge reach, right? Because of that, he figured, hey, maybe readers of his work would donate just $1 single US. But he laments that over a decade later, fewer than 10 people actually paid that dollar. To make matters worse, his published books were banned, so he couldn't even make back his printing costs. He's telling us he is entirely, completely financially ruined by this mission.
But honestly, the financial ruin and family drama were just the start. Let's look at Section 4, Repeated Government Evictions, the Relentless Exodus.
Let's walk through this timeline because the cycle is dizzying. According to Xu Feng, they scrape together what little money they have. They build these beautiful, poetic communities in Yunnan back in 2009, and boom, the government forces over 150 of them out. So they flee to Nanjing, build homes, plant crops, demolished again. They trek all the way out to Xinjiang, build again, wait until the harvest is finally ready, evicted again. They even try sneaking back to Yunnan for one last try, only to get hit with a fourth crushing eviction.
To really hammer home the profound weight of all this running, Xu Feng elevates their struggles to the level of epic myth. He claims their suffering was actually worse than the legendary 6,000-mile long march of the Chinese Red Army. He even says it exceeds the mythical trials of the Tong monk traveling west. He is trying to communicate an almost superhuman level of desperation and endurance.
Of course, you can't live on the run like that without it destroying people. That brings us to Section 5, the heavy personal toll, breaking points. This number represents some heartbreaking vulnerability. After more than 10 years of being chased, Xu Feng reveals that over 20 members of the community are now over 70 years old, and they are completely destitute. They have absolutely no income, no pensions, and because of those severed family ties we talked about earlier, they have literally no way back into normal society. He's asking a very real question. How on earth are they supposed to care for these elderly members now that everything is destroyed?
As all this pressure mounts to a breaking point, Xu Feng makes a massive, messianic comparison. He aligns his own persecution directly with the suffering of the most famous religious figures in human history. He writes that he finally understands the exact pain Jesus felt on the cross and the sorrow that made the Buddha cry. It is a really striking, profound moment of self-elevation right in the face of absolute, total defeat.
And that sets the stage for the climax of the manifesto, Section 6, the final ultimatum, a warning to humanity. Here, he leaves zero room for debate. Maintaining strict neutrality as we report his claims, Xu Feng's ultimate assertion is that his specific path is the only way humanity survives. He states unequivocally that he is the absolutely sole candidate capable of leading the human race out of the catastrophic doom he predicted at the start of his letter. Nobody else, just him. So how does he answer all those critics and trolls mocking him? With this incredibly chilling prediction. He basically tells his detractors to go ahead and laugh, because he promises a really grim vindication. He asserts that when the catastrophes finally hit, and people are enveloped by the fear of death one by one, that is exactly when the world will realize who he truly is. He believes absolute terror will be his ultimate validation.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question, pulled straight from the last lines of his text. Xu Feng intimately links the fate of his tiny, exhausted group to the survival of the entire human race. He warns that pushing his followers into a dead end is the exact same thing as humanity walking toward complete extinction. It's an intense, uncompromising look into the psychology of a man who firmly believes he's standing completely alone as the last hope for a dying world. So, what do you think? Does silencing the fringes spell doom for society itself? Think about that, and I'll see you in the next explainer.